Hello there, it's David Taylor, or Mr Pelargonium as some people like to call me, and I'm back with another one of my video blogs for the Pelargonium and Geranium Society. Accept my apology, I've not done a great deal of videos really more recently. I've just been very busy over a number of issues, some of which you'll probably find out about at a later stage, but it's that time of year now. We've gone over into October, it's early October, I'm filming this on the 5th. And I've been very busy actually potting up plants ready for exhibition next year, all getting them into their final pots. And it's cutback time for some of my really big plants that I've not done yet, more particularly the zoonotic types. I'm going to really hack some of those back. Now, as I've just said, I have been potting up my exhibition plants into their final pot just really in the last week or two. And here's examples of some that I've just done this morning. These are some regals here that I potted up. They're just standing in water. I usually stand them in water for about an hour, then take them out. So they're done. I've got a lot of young plants up here that I will put up to probably about a 4-inch pot. These are just in 3.5-inch dump pots. I'll put them into 4-inch full pots over the coming weeks. Here's some zonals that I've done earlier. They've gone into their final pot, 6-inch pot in this case. So I've been working full steam ahead to get these done and ready for sort of overwintering. I will strip some of the leaves off to let a bit more air move around the stems as the season progresses and as we get more towards the winter. But the weather in the UK has actually been very warm. We've had very warm weather realistically over the past month or so, really since the start of the autumn. We've had, strangely, a couple of weeks ago we did have some early frosts. It's the first time I've known us have frosts in central southern England in September for many years. And I had to have the heater on. That's unusual really, but it's warmed up again now. So, you know, the weather's still very warm, so I'm defoliating a bit, particularly as I pot on. Here's one I've done this morning. This is a plant of Point South, and I've really stripped that back. That's been potted on, and I've completely defoliated it. It's in its final 6-inch pot, ready for exhibition next year. So I'm tending to strip them back more. Now, I've got some very large plants, and this is a large Rushmore Nile, a huge pot. There's probably in about an 18-inch pot, and I've let this dry out. Hence the reason I've got a lot of yellow leaves, is because that is bone dry, and I will probably cut that back this afternoon and show you a before and after. Right, now the other thing that I will show you this afternoon, I've spoken a little bit about it. These are our standards. You remember we potted up some standards of the Stella Robin Louise, which is one that I bred a good number of years ago. Does very well as a compact dwarf Stella. And I'm going to show you how I just straighten these stems. These have grown on a bit now, these young plants. They've got a good bit of a stem on them. But they are slightly keeling over. It's what naturally happens if you want the plants to grow on. They will naturally want to bush as they get taller. So you have to sort of cut the supplementary little growth stems that are shooting out because they want to bush out naturally. But to entice the stem to grow further up, we're having to take some of those side stems off. But what you do by doing that is bend the stem over slightly. So I'm going to show you what I do to straighten the stem in order for it to continue to grow up taller before we want to make it the bushy head that we want to achieve. Now if we look in, hopefully that's going to pick that up, we can see that we've got, you know, several side shoots growing on in here. We've got side shoots growing out there, so there's lots of scope still for this to create a bushy head. Okay, but I'm actually, you see this side shoot here, this one here I'm actually going to take out because it's right on the sort of bend that I want to straighten. So I'm going to take that one out. Okay, there we are. I've taken that sort of top side shoot out now. So we've just basically got a curved stem. And there is a relatively straightforward way to try and bend that back up like this. There's a bit of flexibility because this young standard has got a green stem. It's a very young plant. I mean, these cuttings were only taken back in early July. So we got plenty of scope. That stem is really quite soft, so we can easily begin to bend that round. And the way we do it, I'm just going to adjust the camera here. Right, now I'm just sort of zooming in so that you can really see what we're doing. Now, the way that we do this is using basically just ordinary little sticks. And here's an example of the sort of thing that we're going to use. We're not going to stick anything in the compost at this stage, okay? This is just purely going to be basically lined up on this stem here. And we're just going to tie round and pull that up against this stick. So the first thing that we need to do is tie this stick against the straight bottom part of the stem, which we want straight. So let's see if I can home in again. So there we are, that's going to be tied. Now what we need to do is tie it so that it is literally lined up to the bent stem that we want to pull back. Okay, so that's sort of how we're going to position the stick. So it's right adjacent to the pullback that we're going to want on that bent stem. So there we are. Just tie that on. So there we are. That's tied against that. Okay. So that's going to be straight against the bottom part of that stem. And what we're going to do, we're going to use that as a lever to pull this back. Now, the key thing when you're doing this is not to over tighten it because you don't want to snap the stem. So you may actually need to do this in a couple of phases. You also do not want to pull on the little side shoots that are sticking out, so that you actually sort of pull them off. Right, so there we are. It's just sod's law that I couldn't quite get it straight, but there we are. I've done it in the end. Now you can see here sort of how it's gone. What I've done, you see, I've tied it around the base. And that's sort of put the straight stem to line up, and I've just tied in the top part of the stem that was turned away, and I've just tied that and pulled that part of the stem back in. Okay, and that'll straighten. I'm doing it in two phases. What will basically happen, I didn't want to pull that any more than that, but that will then harden there. I will probably keep that on like that for about a month, maybe a little bit less. I'll see how it grows, but that's going to pull that stem straight. I have got a leaf in the way there, but I'm not too bothered about that because the main thing I want to do is just straighten that up, and then I can finish it off once it's sort of grown to straighten. And that will grow, that will straighten now, and we're lengthening the length of the standard, okay? We're lengthening the standard so that we can carry on growing up, because I would like to ideally get up to about the top of this stick here. I'll do that there, about the top of this stick here, before I start to sort of let it branch naturally. So it's still got a bit of growing to do yet. But that's basically the idea of it. You're sort of securing a stick that's not stuck in that stick, it's not stuck into the compost, to the straight part of the stem at the bottom, and then you're just basically pulling the bent part of the stem back up against the stick which is secured down below. So that stick can't sort of move, and if you secure it, it's just going to pull the bend over back onto the stick, which is straight more or less against the bottom of this standard. Okay, so that's the technique I use to getting straight stems, and realistically you can carry on doing that right through its age until obviously you get to the required height, and at that point you can just let it naturally bush, and then you shape the body of the plant just as you would a normal standard. Okay, so that's the standard, just straighten. I've got a couple of others to do there, which I'll do this afternoon. These are on the dry side, but I've taken a stem off there, so I won't water. I'll give that a day or two before I water it. If you haven't needed to take a stem off, you can water them straight away. Now, other than potting on my exhibition plants, I've got a lot of plants, a lot of big plants still to cut back, as I mentioned earlier. And this one here, this is a big Zone Arctic, which has grown like crazy. This is a plant called Rushmore Nile, and it's grown like bonkers. But it really needs cutting back now. I cannot have a plant this size in my glasshouse over the winter. So I've let it really dry. It is bone dry, which is why there's a fair number of yellowing leaves on it in particular. So I'm going to slice this back now, and I'll give you a bit of a heads up as to what I do. I'm not going to do a long sort of fast forward on this because I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this. So I'll cut back in a moment and show you how it goes at the end. Right, okay, well, we've come back. This did take me about half an hour, actually. That is what you call a cut-back plant. If I just take the camera off the tripod there. And there we go. I mean, massive amount of debris, but really hard cut back. The compost, the key though, always with cutting plants back is making sure that your compost is bone dry. Otherwise, I mean, particularly these Zone Arctic stems, which are huge, these would bleed. If this compost was wet, these would bleed and they would just rot. They would completely rot back. But this compost is bone dry, and so these are heal very quickly. And then obviously in the future I won't be watering this too much now, and it won't need much anyway as we approach the winter, of course. So there's a very, very big plant that's been cut back hard. I've got a few others to do, so we'll progress with those. Now, as we look around the greenhouse, talking of standards, another standard that I have got here is a plant of Phyllis. This is a unique type Pelargonium, variegated leaf variety. And I did have a very big one of these several years ago, but I'm growing another one now. This has been tied in, potted it on yesterday, but that's doing quite well. So it shows you what you can do with standards, any type of standard. Another one that I've done is this plant of Paxamelia. This is one of the commercial varieties. Yeah, that's grown up quite nicely, and I'm getting a good shape on that. I had to cut it back very hard because it didn't grow how I wanted it initially. So that's done quite well, and in its actual fact it's flower. I took some flowers off it yesterday. But I straightened it up a bit yesterday. So, I mean, always, if you're getting a little bit of a buckle, you can just tie into your master stem. This one has got the stem pointing right down through into the compost. We'll talk about that at a later stage with these other ones that are here that we've spoken about today. There's the one that I just did earlier. We'll go through those as they progress, and we'll see how they go over the coming months. Okay, so I think that's about it for today. Again, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments column below. And in the meantime, if you're new to viewing this channel, please click the subscribe button and I'll be glad to see you again. But in the meantime, goodbye for now.